And I believe there is a massive story unfolding in the Far East. Now, Xi Jinping, that lovable leader of China, his COVID policy has been such a catastrophe, trying to lock down the entire nation in his futile COVID zero bid, his bid to stamp out COVID altogether. When are these politicians going to learn humans cannot beat viruses? We wasted 2 years indulging that fantasy. Xi Jinping carried on trying to beat it, literally locking down, eventually realised only recently it's never going to work, let everybody out, and now COVID is running rampant through China. Something like 50% of the population are supposed to have it. Now, he's been embarrassed. He's admitted he was wrong. This is unusual for a Chinese leader. And he's admitted that people had a right to be furious about his policies. He's embarrassed. He's shamed by his behaviour. So what's he doing now? They say he's planning to invade Taiwan to restore his reputation as a tough guy in the East. Of course, this spectre has been hanging over us for some time, but now many experts say he's on the brink of doing it in order to overshadow his COVID catastrophe. If that happens, we have a gathering storm in the Far East. Already, British companies are leaving Taiwan ahead of what they believe will soon be a full-on Russia-style invasion. They invaded Ukraine. China will invade Taiwan. Now let's go straight to my first guest on this issue, Asia political risk analyst in Taiwan, Ross Feingold. Hello, Ross.
Good evening from Taipei.
How real is this? British firms are already leaving Taiwan, fearing that an embarrassed Xi Jinping will finally unleash the full power of China on poor little Taiwan. People must be getting pretty nervous there.
The advice I give to the corporate world or to government political leaders here in Taiwan is always to assume that an invasion could happen anytime and prepare accordingly, because you have to take the threat seriously. China has not renounced the use of force to take over Taiwan. They're not joking. They're investing heavily in their military. They're conducting exercises, and specifically amphibious exercises, Navy air exercises that are designed to test their military to bring about an invasion of Taiwan. So it would be extremely foolish to ignore those threats and not to prepare accordingly. Again, whether you're in the corporate world or government, political diplomats, etc. If we go back to just a year ago, President Zelensky, who we all love now because his leadership in the face of Russia's invasion, he was kind of unhappy that other countries, the United States and the UK, were saying, hey, an invasion might happen. You better get ready. He said, hey, you're going to scare away investors. Don't say that. And that's really not a great way to play it, actually. So the threat is very real. On the other hand, though, and this is important as well, here in Taiwan, it's mostly business as usual. So even last summer when Pelosi visited and China conducted military exercises, people here go about work, school, play. It doesn't really change their day-to-day calculations. That being said, for example, high net worth individuals here in Taiwan, you could be assured that they're looking at ways to move more of their money outside of Taiwan.
Yeah, no, indeed. But we must remember, the day before Russia invaded Ukraine, life went on as normal. This is what happens. People, they have to go to work. They still go out to restaurants and bars. They carry on their lives. And then suddenly the cataclysm happens. And that strikes me exactly the position that Taiwan is in now, because, Xi Jinping always had intentions on Taiwan. They've never accepted that Taiwan was independent anyway. But because of his catastrophic COVID policies, he's looking foolish. He's humiliated. He wants to re-establish himself as a tough guy, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's typical, right? You play the nationalism card when you have domestic problems, and that happens in countries all over the world. You don't have to be a communist country for that to happen. It happens in democracies too. But here's another interesting thing, and I would say it's actually something that should concern us, and that is throughout the 3 years of the pandemic, China has not reduced the pace of its military preparations, whether that's directed at Taiwan or we've seen the border disputes with India that became rock-throwing fights, and there were casualties, and military exercises with Russia is something that China's been doing with frequency and with great strength, actually, both naval as well as air exercises. So at the risk of using one of those cliche American phrases, but I'll take some liberty being an American, they've shown that they could walk and chew gum at the same time when it comes to, say, dealing with COVID, but also maintaining the military pressure, again, whether that's Taiwan, India, South China Sea, East China Sea, facing off against Japan, where they have a dispute over the Senkaku Diaoyutai Islands. So this kind of walk and chew gum at the same time thing, again, it's something that policymakers need to be concerned about.
Indeed they do. So when Nancy Pelosi went there, you know, in order to get people to vote Democrat in the midterms and stirred up a real hornet's nest, you know, China, although it looked threatening, it maintained a sort of dignified silence and actually it wasn't silent about it. It criticised the visit, but it didn't act on it. I would suggest from what I'm reading now that the situation is more tense than during the Pelosi visit.
They didn't act insofar as there was no action in the air to obstruct her aircraft, for example. But those military exercises that took place right around the time she departed and went on for close to a week or a little bit more than a week, again, very serious stuff, very scary, and it shows that they can integrate the different branches of their military, and they're willing to exercise, conduct these exercises to show that they're very serious about a potential invasion. And there's a huge cost involved, not just for them, but for here in Taiwan, because the military has to respond. Taiwan's own Navy, Air Force troops go on alert. That's a big drain on resources. It's very exhausting. The next question is now we can put aside Pelosi, and I agree with you. I think she came here for one reason only, and that was to allow Democrats to say that we're tough on China as well. Look, our speaker visited Taiwan and put up her middle finger at China. So the next question is now, because that was 6 months ago, Speaker McCarthy, are you going to come to Taiwan? And when are you going to do it?
That depends on whether or not his new right-wing controllers will allow him to do that. Stay with us there, Ross, because I'm with broadcaster Claire Muldoon. She wants to ask you a question.
Morning. Hi, how are you? I'm just, not
Hi,
only Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, but I'm more interested in Kamala Harris, who went in September 2022. And I think this is a ruse by the West. I think the optics of it are such that the West knew that Xi Jinping was going to stoke the fires of an invasion of a la land grab, like Russia did for Crimea, like they're trying to do now for Ukraine. And I just wondered what the optics would have been had Kamala Harris gone out there, which she did do in September. Why? What was the purpose of it?
Well, Kamala Harris has made a number of overseas trips, Central America, Asia. I guess part of Biden giving her a chance to actually do something. Frankly, her performance in these trips had been very underwhelming. No country was really impressed with anything she said or any commitments she made in the foreign policy space. But she won't come here. The Biden administration has not sent a cabinet-level official to Taiwan. The Trump administration did send one towards the end in August 2020. The Secretary of Health came here, and that was followed a few weeks later by a Deputy Undersecretary of State who came here in September 2020. So Biden, it kind of shows that's one distinction, because if Trump had been reelected, I'm quite sure there would have been a cabinet level follow-up visit over the past couple of years of second Trump administration. And that's one area where critics will say, Biden, you're just too accommodating to China because you won't even send a cabinet level official to Taiwan It could be something somewhat innocuous. Again, the health secretary, the transportation secretary, and you let China react with its usual angry statements. But Biden's not even willing to do that. So again, that leaves a space for McCarthy to come here if he's willing to do it. And then the other thing to watch in the next 6 months, and I think this is also very interesting, as we go into the Republican presidential primary, how many of the Republican or potential Republican presidential candidates will come here? I'm betting Governor DeSantis of Florida is going to show up here in Taiwan.
That's a good. Listen, last question, Ross. Personally, are you worried about this situation? What happens if China does invade? How will that affect American residents of Taiwan? Are you a little disconcerted?
I don't worry about it personally. I was talking about it with my girlfriend who's sitting right next to me at the moment, shying away from the camera. She said, I'll leave and you could come running after me. You don't want to have a defeatist message either. People here, they always they bring up, like, is it going to be like Saigon in 75 or Kabul in 2021? What's the American plan to evacuate citizens? There is a plan, and everyone's just going to run to the airport and try and get on either commercial or government aircraft. But again, I would push that back to the policymakers, and starting with the policymakers here in Taiwan, because it's up to, first and foremost, before America or Japan or Australia could come to assist Taiwan, it's up to the people and the government of Taiwan to defend their island.
Ross, fantastic to talk to you, and stay safe. That was Ross Feingold. He is an Asia political risk analyst right there in Taiwan, where we understand that China, or Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, may be on the brink of launching an invasion. So I guess the question is there a gathering storm in the Far East, as if we haven't got enough problems already?